One more time for Caroline. Give it up for her. That story was amazing. Keep it going for John J. Reed coming up to the stage now. Come on.
It's heavy as the head that wears the crown, man.
Huh?
Heavy as the head that wears the crown.
Yeah. No, you're all going to expect something really extraordinary. And I put so much work into that Moth, the Grand Slam, and not so much here. Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I just, Jesus. It's another Sunday afternoon shopping for yachts in beautiful Southern California. And when my father asked the dealer if he'll bring the price down by $100,000 if we pay cash, and the dealer says no, we leave. Which is fine because we need to get home early enough that Mom can put into the oven the tuna and egg noodle casserole she made that morning so that we can eat early enough that she can go to bed early enough to get up at 5, do her hair, iron her scrubs, and make the hour-long drive to her job as a dental hygienist. My father will get up at the same time, but when she drives off, he'll go to his office, which is the small third bedroom in the rented tract house we have. One wall of this room is covered with corkboard, into which he has affixed little circles he's cut from construction paper. And then these are connected by different colored strands of yarn, like the kind of yarn that a kid would glue to an empty coffee can to make a pencil holder. And then each circle has the name of the person, place, or thing that needs to be organized for his corporation to take off. And my dad spends his days in there reorganizing that wall. My dad is going to be a financial superstar, hence the yacht shopping we needed to prepare. And this, you have to laugh, yeah. This went on for 18 years, But this Sunday we came home to find Jim and Ed waiting in the living room for us. Jim and Ed are my half-brothers. They're the product of my mother's first husband to a man who treated her very poorly. The last thing he did was when she went out shopping with the boys, he killed himself in her bed. So she came home to find that. And then she married my father, and 18 years of disappointment ensued. So this woman went through it. But we walked in there, and Jim and Ed were there, and these guys both work construction. They're both well over 6 foot. Jim is all back muscle and ham shank arms. Ed is muscly, but he's lean as a designated runner, and the feeling in the room was tense, to say the least. There was very little air, and what air there was full of cigarette smokes, because all these men smoked like crazy. The moment we got into the living room, Ed pulled from his back pocket a thick envelope, threw it onto the coffee table. It slid to where my father was standing, and he said, "That's $2,000. Jim looked at my dad and said, "You need to pack some things." My dad tried to act like this wasn't happening. He took out his Chesterfield Kings and tried to light one, but he was shaking so violently he couldn't do it. And then Jim turned to me and said, "Johnny, you need to go to your room." And I looked to Mom for like some, guidance, but I could see she had disappeared into herself. This is something that she could do, and I can do, actually. I learned it from her. She could disappear into herself in your presence. And what she was really doing was playing her role, the role she was meant to play in the way our house was set up. You have to remember that when I was born, my mother was 42, and my dad was 45, and that was very old back then in the 60s for people to be having kids. They were always confused for being my grandparents. The paradigm they had set up was very much in line with that period of time. My mother was literally the little woman, emphasis on little. I watched the first half hour of Mad Men, the first episode, couldn't watch anymore because of the way the women were treated. Just so kind of took me back to this kind of awful thing where, although he was the king of the house, he was the ruler, this was his domain, somehow it didn't mix into this the fact that she earned the goddamn money and paid for the tuna casserole and paid the rent. He was still the king of the house, because of this system they had set up. But when this was happening in the living room with Jim and Ed, it was like, holy crap. In some part of my brain, I knew this had never made sense, but suddenly it was like this tectonic shift was happening where it was like reality was coming, like your reality, normal reality was like somehow coming into our home. And it was like, and Jimmy said to me, "Johnny, go to your room." So I went to my room and I put a pillow over my head because shoving and yelling and stuff was going on. About a half hour later, I took it off, and my bedroom window looks right on the front yard. So I went and I stood there and looked out, and it was pitch black. Nighttime had fallen. And then light shone on it, which I knew meant the front door had opened. And it was like this yellow raking kind of Edward Hopper light coming out. And then Jim, Ed, and my dad appeared, and they were flanking him. And they weren't touching him, but they were ready to touch him. And Ed and Jim both had huge duffel bags on their shoulders. They walked to the curb and put my dad in his brown Cadillac Fleetwood, a decade old, but always a Cadillac and usually a Fleetwood. He turned the ignition, and then my mother came out onto the front porch, and it was like she tried to, hug herself as much as she could, and this yellow light was hitting her back and kind of refracting off of her like a nimbus around her. At least, this is how I remember it. And then, we were all standing there in complete silence, and the only thing we heard was the of this very old engine. And then finally, after a long period, he slowly drove off into the darkness. And the thing about this is that for the first time in our lives, the world made sense. And my mother and I both disappeared much less frequently. And we actually got to know each other really for the first time with this man gone. Finally, a man who wasn't a bad man, he was a sick man, but he was gone and our lives flourished. But most important, for the next 30 years until she died at the age of 86, my mother was no one's little woman. Thank you.